My name's Joe Hardy and I'm part of HP's pre-sales organisation. I'm actually aligned to global accounts normally, but I cover all parts of the portfolio, especially around our converged system product lines. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about those today and a bit about some of the other parts. Paul also mentioned that I joined HP as a graduate. That was around 3 years ago now. I'm still living off the sort of the graduate tag, but what it kind of shows is that HP as an organisation is employing a lot of people from different backgrounds now. We've got a very broad kind of workforce and people with different skill sets fitting in different places. So without sort of much around this, I wanted to cover off the majority of what we announced really towards the tail end of last year around the ProLiant family and our server platforms in general. So this is a bit of a family portrait of the different models and things that kind of fit in within ProLiant. But I really wanted to go back to what servers and what some of those pieces of infrastructure kind of mean. So we often talk about the longevity of HP ProLiant. It's a product that's been in the market now for over 25 years. We sort of talk about where's it going in the next 25 years. And about reimagining what ProLiant means and how it fits into the data center environment. The world of client-server-based kind of architectures and centralized resources is moving and changing. Cloud is driving that, and all sorts of things are making that happen. Really, we see these key elements being key, the things that drive change. We've seen the changes to the sort of IT landscape as a consumer, but IT organizations have to cope with those changes from a business perspective as well. This means that we see a change in how IT organizations have to look at business around these areas along the bottom. Change is happening a lot, and the speed that we need to adapt to new applications being implemented, things like that. We've just heard from Paul how we do that from a network perspective, but across the whole IT organization in general, we're having to cope with this pace of change. So how can we do that? How do we really look at moving from kind of traditional IT and the way we did that to what we at HP term the new style of IT? And it's really about moving away from having tools and devices that are centric around the technology that's built into those, and moving instead to things that are centered around service-orientated IT, trying to deliver a service back to your organization to do these kind of things. And that's all around these kind of points here. Time savings that we can make, anything we can do that actually improves the value of running an application on a particular platform. In a cloud world, why do I want to run things in-house that I could get and consume from a server, from a partner, from a public operator, those kinds of things? We want to try and get everything so that we marry the right platform with the right application. And that's been really key to what we've done within kind of the ProLiant portfolio. So with the latest release of ProLiant Generation 9, we've looked at kind of 3 key areas. How we can address capacity and the space savings, the economy savings that we can make with a better utilization, how we can actually accelerate the ability to get these systems into use and for people to actually really get a benefit from some of the hardware we put in place, so that we can get a net result of boosting the performance of the applications we run in an environment and boost the overall kind of value of IT within that organization. And this key message along here really is quite important for what our strategy is moving forward. It's about getting the right compute platform for the right workload, for the right price every time. And that's really key to how we've tried to design our portfolio. So to look at some of that economics in more of a hardware kind of focus and some of the technology that we use to do that, it's things like increasing capacity. We've seen general trends around the increase in available space on things like SSDs and the memory components within devices. But we've also seen some of this improvements around capacity per watt of actual power capability. This is around things like more energy efficient SSDs, more energy efficient processors, things like that, to reduce the total cost of ownership of some of the platforms. In the world of compute resources today, where I've got many vendors who can all produce a unit with the same processor from the same manufacturer in there, these sort of things are what become more of a purchasing decision when you're trying to decide what platform to go with. The ongoing costs of operating on that platform becomes quite important. We also see changes around trying to really fit the right features of a platform to the IT operations that customers are facing. We have some customers that are running data centers unmanned. They need compute units in those data centers that can work in that kind of automated and remote environment. But we have other customers that are dealing with their devices in the same office as a tower server in a back room. They need to get a good user experience across all of those things. So we talk about this idea of tailoring the platforms to suit the environment that they fit into. And across the whole portfolio, reduce the amount of space some of these units take up. Space is becoming a premium. I deal with a lot of customers in London that are really facing challenges on how their data centers grow and what they're able to do. Space is something that's often overlooked, but actually can be a very sort of important factor when defining what requirements we need from a particular platform. If we look at how we actually use these to deliver services and get business benefits from the top of that, it's really around not just kind of some of the features of the hardware, but capability that we build into the way we update the drivers, we update the firmware on the units. So things like HP's Smart Update Manager tool, which can be used to automate deployment of firmware, drivers, all of these components across an environment at a massive scale, become really important. What we've tried to do with some of our firmware management compared to some of our sort of competitors in the market is make that a lot more efficient and easy to manage through a system of kind of point release service packs. Very similar to how we see in some of the software vendors. What we're saying is that HP will release periodic software updates that you can plan to, that you can work towards, that we will then support for a year when we release, to take out some of the pain of sort of server platform firmware management that has been an issue on really with all the different infrastructure products for a number of years. There are also things like our integrated lights out management technology. This is something that we build into every single ProLiant that provides, at a very basic level, a remote console, but actually a lot of other capabilities around device management. It's kind of a management appliance built into every single server. What we're able to do now is actually federate those appliances together so that different ProLiant servers are able to detect faults on adjacent ProLiant servers. This means that we've got an element of redundancy across multiple servers. We've got the capability to diagnose faults with entire racks of servers rather than just taking each case in isolation. It means that from a management perspective, when we bring a new ProLiant server into the environment, the other ProLiant servers already there can communicate with the ILO, populate the IP address, and inform you that there is a new server in the environment, what do you want to do with it. And all that kind of capability comes through the ability to basically discover new ILO management engines on a network. We've seen a general trend with the Gen 9 portfolio as well to move to UEFI-based BIOS. So this is the same sort of platforms that we're used to seeing in the consumer space. It gives us a lot more capability around interacting with the devices, scripting the setups, the sort of CLIs that we're used to maybe more in the networking world are things that we want to be able to support people being able to script deployments for server estates as well. And having UEFI BIOS combined with some of our technology around RESTful APIs and things like that helps us expand the capability of managing ProLiant servers at scale, whether we're talking a few servers in a wiring closet or many servers in a large data center. We want a consistent management experience across all of those things. And there is that, and then has the kind of enablement to speed up how quickly we can bring new servers into an environment, how we can provision and things like that. So it's about changing these things. And from a cloud perspective, I mean, cloud is an interesting conversation, I think, to have in a lot of places. But if we take cloud to be a way of us delivering a platform or delivering infrastructure, it gets very exciting when we can say, well, I can script this and I can bring on a new server from opening a cardboard box to having it ready to run my applications, my cloud-ready infrastructure in minutes through some of these tools becomes kind of quite key and important around that sort of service delivery. Performance-wise, again, we're seeing increases in the capability of the hardware, things like 12 gigabit SAS on the storage connections, and that enabling us to have greater performance there. But we're also seeing increases in terms of some of the networking capability of the ProLiant servers themselves as well. So all ProLiant servers now come with an element of 1 gigabit networking on the motherboard. In Generation 8, we moved that to basically a separate card. That's back onto the system board for Gen 9 to kind of reduce the overall cost of some of these platforms, and also give us the flexibility for people to move to 10 gig when they need to. But really what we're seeing is the capability of some of our new adapters to handle small packets, some of the small pieces of information that are really happening a lot when we talk about virtualized workloads or servers dealing with call handling, dealing with those kind of things, become very important, and we've seen an increase in the capability around that. Overall of this, it becomes really, the thing that ties this stuff together is management and what we can do with management tools. So Paul mentioned our Intelligent Management Center product from a networking perspective. We have another management tool called HP OneView, which we use in the data center to manage our servers and our storage portfolio. This is a tool that's really been designed from the ground up to be fit for all of those things I talked about earlier around being service orientated rather than hardware orientated. It's a tool that lets us manage things as workflows and as tasks rather than as control panels of pieces of infrastructure. And that's kind of a different view on the same pieces of hardware, but giving you a different experience when you're trying to manage devices. What it lets us do is increase the amount of automation that we can bring into these sort of systems to speed up that provisioning, make it easier to deploy new infrastructure, to react quicker. We're also able to deploy virtual machines faster when we have hook-ins from things like HP OneView through to different hypervisor vendors, management tools, whether we're talking about Microsoft or others. We're able to hook into some of that and get benefits in how we deploy new hypervisors when we use tools like OneView to actually set up and commission the underlying platforms. And across all of that, that helps speed up how we can deliver new products and bring things to market quicker. From a technology perspective, we've seen a general increase in Gen 9 in terms of processor capability over and above the processors we had available in Gen 8. So both the Sandy Bridge and the Ivy Bridge platforms were available on our Gen 8 ProLiant servers. With Haswell, we're seeing a massive performance increase against Ivy Bridge, which includes, obviously, the performance increase from Ivy Bridge to Sandy Bridge as well. So we're seeing a lot more cores on those available for virtualization and for applications to use. We're also seeing a completely new architecture with Haswell, and this has some benefits around how it handles specific workloads and specific applications where we're processing a lot of data. It means that we're getting a lot of performance out of these compared to previous units. That can mean that actually I can take a lower powered processor than maybe I would have had in a previous generation and get the similar kind of performance from it, reducing the overall cost of ownership, reducing the cost of acquisition, all of those things. So it means it's a really compelling time to look at some of the servers that are maybe 3 to 5 years old in your environment and say, what could we consolidate onto something that's based on Haswell because of the performance increases that we've seen on this kind of platform. To look at them in a little bit more detail, I wanted to show you what we've actually got in terms of hardware and the portfolio that we've released. So this is a kind of a family snapshot of the various Gen 9 servers that were launched towards the tail end of last year. Obviously, we have things like the BL460, which fits into our Blade system portfolio of products. But in the rack and tower space, we've seen a change in how we're delivering our platforms. There's this concept of a 300 series and a 100 series. Now, we've had that previously in sort of the G5 to G6 timeframe, but they were quite often it was you took a lot of hit in terms of the features of the platform compared to the 300 series, stuff like that. With Gen 9, what we've said is those core parts of ProLiant, those core things that I've just talked to you about today and shown you on those previous slides, that's stuff that's common to all of our products. ILO management engine is baked into every single platform that we market as a Gen 9 product. We've got the same kind of features across all of these. The differences are about tailoring the server kind of form factor and the device to fit the application that you guys want to run on it. So for instance, the DL380, which is our most popular unit, is available as a 1U server, and they share exactly the same components. We've got no differences in terms of the system board or the way we've designed the servers. The differences are, do you need an application that needs a lot more storage density? Well, we can go for something like the 380 instead and kind of increase that footprint. So it's all about making an easier to kind of optimize portfolio of server products that then match to the applications that you fit in. The 100 series are going to include the majority of those same features. They're going to take the same processors and have the same amount of memory capacity that we would expect for that kind of thing, but delivered in a more kind of cost-effective form factor than we otherwise would have had. Around December time, we brought out a 10 series as well, so we have a DL80 and a DL60, as well as a 180 and a 380. And what that lets us do is really drive down some of the extras that we would normally include on top of that core ProLiant infrastructure, and say for things like applications that require software level redundancy instead of us doing it in hardware, where we can put a platform that has standard drives and has standard power supplies, or you can optionally have redundant drives, redundant power supplies, those kinds of things, and expand it out. At the high end, we've also expanded our portfolio around some of our sort of ultra high density compute platforms, and that's where HP's Apollo technology starts to fit in. But really, the key value for a lot of our Gen 9 innovation is in our rack and our tower portfolio. Things like the ML150 and the ML350, which sit now as a really good platform for storage density and that kind of thing. We can get 48 disks into an ML350. Put that as a rack mount unit, and it's a really nice platform for Exchange, or a really good platform when we're looking at having large kind of enterprise vault direct attached storage straight into the unit. To look at the DL380 in a little bit more detail, I wanted to show you some of the modularity that we've tried to design into the portfolio with Gen 9. So for instance, if we look here at the front of the server, you can see there are these three kind of evenly spaced building blocks. What that lets us do is we can actually grow the storage capacity of the server by adding in banks of 8 disks. So you can start with 8, grow to 16, and you can actually get 24 disks onto the front of a DL380, and also onto a 180 as well. So we have that common kind of modularity between the different components. You can see inside we've tried to keep a lot of the same design ideas that we had with the Gen 8 portfolio around toolless management, making it really simple to use. If we look at that just in a little bit more detail in a second, but I wanted to highlight the fact that the DL360 is actually almost identical now internally to the DL380. So quite often we saw customers always purchasing DL380s. This gives an opportunity where perhaps you don't need quite as many disks along the front or as many expansion cards around the back. The 360 can really start to fit in as a decent platform for those applications. This is the system board that's common to both of those units, and I just wanted to call out a couple of key features that are different now in Gen 9 compared to some of our Gen 8 products and earlier devices. For instance, the array controller that we would use to connect through to the storage devices in Gen 9 is a separate card now. That means it's optional. It means something that you can have if you need that kind of capability, but it means we can have a portfolio of different devices. We see a big uptake in virtualized SAN technologies, whether that's things like the Store Virtual product lines from HP or storage spaces from Microsoft, those kinds of technologies. We have hardware now that can support that sort of implementation of storage within the platform. We still have the capability to put 10 gig networking onto the system boards without actually consuming any of the PCI slots. What we do is we have a flexible LAN on motherboard card that fits into a special slot down here to make it much easier to kind of provision and use. You still have fully redundant fans. You still have the capability to hot swap all the components that we highlight with the HP red colours. These are all things that we can replace in the field, and we've got a good portfolio now of options around network interface vendors, storage card vendor, all of these different things, so that you can really tailor it to fit the kind of right platforms. If we compare the 380 to the DL180, you can see, for instance, that we've got a lot of commonality here. They have the same units along the front, but the DL180 is a smaller overall form factor, so it's slightly shorter, which we did because of a lot of kind of customer feedback that sometimes the 380 servers were a bit too big to fit into a lot of racks and standard equipment. So the 180 is physically shorter than previous. We still have the capability for redundancy, so you can see we've got hot plug discs on here. We'd have hot plug fans as well, and redundant power supplies around the rear of the server. But the DL180 has a slightly smaller memory footprint than we would have in the 380. We have 16 slots rather than 24, but that's still a really good capacity for a lot of applications. And if we look at the 80 again, you can see that the DL80 takes away some of that memory capacity, so we have an even smaller kind of footprint. Again, it's the same reduced form factor that we have in the DL180, but we have these different configurations available, whether we're taking hot plug disks, or to really reduce the costs, we can put non-hot plug units in here as well. I see a lot of Hadoop infrastructure and some of the big data applications where we have redundancy across many servers. Actually, having a hot plug drive isn't as necessary as it maybe used to be. So we've addressed the portfolio and said, well, let's support that kind of capability in these platforms as well. So that gives you kind of a deep dive into the different technologies and what we've actually got within the Gen 9 portfolio. I wanted to also talk around really what we can make out of the sum of all of these components. So I've kind of covered a lot of the hardware, but HP are much more than really a hardware vendor. With our converged system product lines, we're showing what we can do around solutions as well. So converged system is something that started around 18 months ago now, and it's really where HP take our server technology, our storage products, our networking technology, and our software portfolio as well. And we wrap those up to deliver complete solutions for virtualization, for big data, for maybe exchange workloads, things like that. So you can come along and buy an entire appliance based on this sort of technology from HP directly. We've got technology solutions based around some of our blade portfolio, but also our rack mounts, and more recently we've also launched hyper-converged offerings as well. So hyper-convergence is all around really combining a lot of that stuff I talked about earlier around software-defined storage with virtualization technologies in a single hardware platform. So as it shows here, we take the storage devices, we take the compute unit, and we take the networking, and we deliver that in a single kind of scale-out building block. We see the industry analysts look at this as really one of the fastest growing market segments at the moment. A lot of interest is coming into really what some of the smaller companies that have started up in this environment are trying to do. At HP, we've been able to say, well, we've got the portfolio of products to build solutions in this space. Wouldn't it be great if we have an offering and we can actually be competitive in this space as well? So we've taken one of our kind of very popular server products, the SL2500, which is basically 4 DL380s in a single unit, 4 dual socket servers in a single platform, and we've combined that with technology from many of our software partners, including Microsoft, VMware, and some of the Linux vendors as well, to deliver really integrated solutions in this kind of scale-out building block approach. So it makes it much easier to grow. We don't have to buy a separate disk shelf, separate storage arrays. We just buy multiple units of this hyper-converged infrastructure, and you scale your compute capacity, your storage capacity, all linearly, and all kind of growing at the same kind of rate. The portfolio for our hyper-converged offerings are based around some of our technology, Store Virtual, which is kind of hypervisor agnostic. We can run Store Virtual systems on VMware, on Hyper-V, on KVM. We've got a really sort of broad support platform there, and we use management tools that hook into the vendor of choice for whichever sort of stream you want to go down. So we can build out a Microsoft version where we would use Hyper-V and we would use System Center with some of the plugins to manage Store Virtual based environments. We also have the capability to deploy this as a cloud offering, so we can put some of our cloud software directly onto this so that you can provision out of the box the same sort of technology that you would get if you were going to HP's cloud websites and downloading some of our stuff from there. We can do it built onto the actual platform itself, or we can do things around EvoRail from VMware. We have a broad portfolio of solutions where the commonality is the platform underneath, and that's really key to converged system. It's about building out on modular components and making it very easy to really get a solution based on whichever vendor, whichever kind of technology you're looking at over the top. From a Microsoft perspective, some of the things where we've really sort of driven enhancements across both the converged system and more widely the ProLiant portfolio is really a lot of effort that we've put into support for things like software-defined storage and that kind of capability. So for instance, our new HBA units that go in the back of the server to provide storage connectivity and now fully supporting of storage spaces with the accompanying disk shelves as well. So we have Generation 8, Gen 9 disk shelves, this D3000 unit that can provide very high performance direct attached storage for storage spaces, for Exchange, things like that, utilizing the same kind of technologies that I just talked about for the ProLiant stuff in the storage elements as well. So you have the same disks, you'd have the same diagnostic capability in these sort of platforms. And that's really kind of key to the ecosystem and the overall components that we try and build around ProLiant and specifically around ProLiant Gen 9. It's about building out the relationships we have with our software vendors through to our actual sort of hardware products, and then delivered through the partner systems and all of the different people that we can talk to specifically about really driving these and building these sort of solutions. We see ProLiant over the next couple of years really moving to more of a kind of a software-defined world. More and more things are becoming software-defined. We've talked about networking today, we've talked about software-defined storage. Everything's getting into, well, what can I write in code and apply to a hardware platform? That is really key. So we're seeing a lot more of that. We're also seeing a rise of some of the technology around the machine. So I don't know, hands up in the room, has anyone heard around HP's strategy for the machine? Or is that just... Yes, thanks Paul, thanks for waving. Yeah, that's great. So HP people have heard about HP's strategy for machine, but more broadly, what this is about HP actually going really down to basics and saying, hey, are we designing computers? Are we designing IT infrastructure in the most efficient way? Is there a better way to design this sort of thing? And HP's projects around the machine are about a totally fundamental shift around how we would deliver compute resource, actual long-term storage, all of these kind of things into new platforms. We've committed to saying that by 2020, we envisage that the machine, which at the moment is a very academic, very research and development level kind of product, is something that we want to bring to market as a commercial solution. We've given ourselves really a 5-year timeline to realize something that's very different as a compute technology from really what's gone before. But what it shows is that the innovation at HP is continuing. We're still seeing some of that stuff come along, and it's something that since Generation 8 and all of the step changes that we saw from G7 to Gen 8 is really starting to pick up and grow faster as we move down the line within that sort of technology. And throughout all of this, what is key and what is fitting in more and more to the center of a lot of this resource is that software-defined infrastructure needs somewhere to run. We need somewhere to execute those sort of things, and that's always going to be the kind of fitting it to the best compute platform that we can do, whether we're talking about all of those different elements. And the things that are key to those are really those 3 points that I was talking about earlier today as well. It's about reducing cost, increasing the speed of which we can deliver new applications so that we can get better performance out of that and get actual business growth from IT, rather than IT being seen so much as a cost. You want to see it more as an enabler for the business kind of running over the top. So that's everything I wanted to show today. Are there any questions or anything I've kind of covered off? I'm more than happy to take questions either now or I can take them afterwards.